There comes a moment in life so quiet, so unfamiliar, that at first you do not even recognize it as love. Not because it lacks passion, but because it lacks pain. And for the souls who have spent years surviving confusion, inconsistency, silence, and emotional storms, peace can feel almost suspicious. You wait for the door to slam, you wait for the coldness, you wait for the distance to return. But this time it does not. This time someone speaks gently when they could have wounded you. This time someone stays when life becomes difficult. And suddenly your heart begins to realize something it was never taught before. Love was never supposed to hurt in order to feel real. A healthy relationship will introduce you to a version of yourself that no suffering ever could. Softer, calmer, safer, and finally free enough to breathe without fear. For so many people, love has been mistaken for endurance. They were taught that loving someone meant constantly proving themselves, sacrificing their peace, walking on eggshells, and surviving emotional storms just to keep a connection alive. They confused anxiety with passion because chaos was the only language their heart had ever learned. And after carrying relationships that felt heavy for so long, they began to believe that exhaustion was simply the price of being loved. But the truth is, love was never designed to drain the life out of you. It was never meant to make you feel lonely while lying beside someone. Real love does not turn your heart into a battlefield. Real love allows your soul to unclench. When you finally enter a healthy relationship, one of the strangest feelings is the silence of unnecessary pain. There are no games to decode, no sudden disappearances that leave you questioning your worth, no cruel words disguised as honesty. You do not spend your nights replaying conversations, searching for hidden meanings, or wondering whether affection will suddenly be withdrawn. Instead, there is consistency, there is reassurance, there is emotional safety. And at first, that kind of peace can feel unfamiliar to someone who has spent years surviving emotional instability. Sometimes you may even mistake calmness for boredom because your nervous system became addicted to unpredictability. But slowly, your heart begins to understand that peace is not emptiness. Peace is what love was always supposed to feel like. A healthy relationship does not force you to abandon yourself in order to keep someone close. You are not required to shrink your personality, silence your needs, or carry the burden of fixing another human being just to earn affection. You are allowed to speak honestly without fear of punishment. You are allowed to have emotions without being called difficult. And perhaps for the first time in your life, you discover what it feels like to rest emotionally in the presence of another person. That kind of love does not weaken you. It restores you. It gives your tired spirit permission to breathe again. There is something deeply healing about being loved by someone who does not make everything feel like a test. In unhealthy relationships, love often feels conditional, as though one mistake could cost you everything. But healthy love does not keep score. It does not manipulate your insecurities or use your vulnerability against you. Instead, it becomes a shelter during difficult days. It becomes the voice that reminds you that disagreements do not have to become destruction, that loyalty does not require suffering, that respect and tenderness can exist together. And perhaps the most beautiful part of a healthy relationship is this: you begin to rediscover yourself. The version of you that existed before fear made you guarded, before heartbreak made you silent, before disappointment convinced you that love must always come with pain. Little by little, you laugh more freely, you sleep more peacefully, you stop preparing yourself for abandonment every time someone becomes quiet. Your heart no longer feels trapped in survival mode, because when love is healthy, it does not feel like drowning while begging to be saved. It feels like finally reaching the shore after years of fighting waves that were never meant to carry you. There is a quiet kind of heartbreak that comes from constantly trying to convince someone to see your value. It is the exhaustion of giving your all while receiving only fragments in return. Some people know what it feels like to sit beside the phone waiting for a message that never comes, to overanalyze cold replies, to wonder why their love is always treated like something optional. They know the pain of being present for someone who only appears when it is convenient, and disappearing pieces of themselves just to avoid being abandoned. Over time, this kind of love teaches a dangerous lesson that affection must be earned through sacrifice, silence, and suffering. But when you finally enter a healthy relationship, something begins to change inside you. You no longer wake up every day trying to prove that you are worthy of staying for. You are not trapped in competition with another person's indecision. You are not left guessing where you stand in someone's life. Healthy love does not place your heart on trial. It does not keep you starving for reassurance while calling it independence. Instead, it chooses you clearly, naturally, and without hesitation. And for someone who has spent years begging for consistency, that kind of certainty can feel almost unbelievable. At first, you may not even know how to receive it. You may still carry the habits created by old wounds. You apologize too much. You prepare yourself for rejection even during peaceful moments. You become nervous when someone is kind to you without asking for anything in return. Part of you waits for the affection to disappear because your past taught you that love often came with conditions. But a healthy relationship slowly teaches your heart that real love does not enjoy watching you suffer for attention. A mature partner does not make you chase them in order to feel powerful. They communicate, they reassure, they show up. And there is something deeply healing about being with someone who makes your presence feel important instead of burdensome. You notice it in small moments, in the way they listen when you speak instead of waiting for their turn to talk, in the way they remember the details you thought nobody cared enough to notice, in the way they protect your feelings even during disagreements. You stop feeling like you must perform perfectly just to deserve tenderness. You realize that love should never feel like standing outside a locked door begging to be let in. The beautiful thing about healthy love is that it does not diminish your dignity. It does not force you to abandon your self-respect in exchange for temporary affection. Instead, it reminds you that the right people will not require you to betray yourself just to keep them close. They will meet your effort with effort, your honesty with honesty, your care with care, and suddenly relationships stop feeling like emotional survival and begin to feel like partnership. When someone truly values you, you can feel the difference without needing grand speeches or dramatic promises. Their actions create emotional safety. Their consistency quiets the fears your past once created. And slowly, the version of you that once begged to be chosen begins to disappear. Not because you stopped caring about love, but because you finally discovered what it feels like to be loved without having to chase it. There are many people in this world who have learned to silence themselves in order to keep love from leaving. They have swallowed their feelings carefully, hidden their pain behind polite smiles, and convinced themselves that speaking honestly would only create distance. They learned that every disagreement could become an argument, every emotion could become a burden, and every truth could be used against them later. So instead of expressing themselves freely, they became smaller, quieter, more cautious. They measured every word before speaking, afraid that one wrong sentence might cost them affection. And over time, this fear does something painful to the human spirit. It teaches people to abandon their own voice just to maintain connection. But when you finally enter a healthy relationship, one of the most life-changing experiences is discovering that honesty no longer feels dangerous. You realize you can speak without trembling inside. You can explain your feelings without being mocked, ignored, or punished for having them. And for someone who spent years surviving emotional unpredictability, that kind of safety feels almost unreal at first. Because healthy love does not force silence upon you. It invites truth. It creates space for your emotions instead of treating them like inconveniences. In unhealthy relationships, communication often becomes a battlefield where one person must win and the other must shrink. Conversations turn into manipulation. Vulnerability becomes ammunition. Some people know what it feels like to open their heart only to have their insecurities thrown back at them during moments of anger. They know the loneliness of trying to explain their pain while the other person dismisses it, minimizes it, or turns themselves into the victim instead. After enough experiences like this, people stop speaking altogether, not because they no longer feel deeply, but because they become exhausted from not being heard. A healthy relationship changes this slowly and gently. It teaches you that love and respect can exist in the same conversation, even during disagreement. You begin to notice the difference in the way conflict is handled. There is no screaming meant to intimidate you, no silent treatment designed to control you, no cruel words spoken just to wound your confidence. Instead, there is listening, patience, accountability, two people trying to understand rather than destroy one another. And this kind of communication heals parts of the heart that trauma once convinced would always remain broken. At first, you may still struggle with fear. You may hesitate before expressing disappointment because your past taught you that honesty creates abandonment. You may over-explain yourself, apologize for your emotions, or become nervous whenever difficult conversations arise. But a healthy partner does not punish your vulnerability. They do not make you regret opening your heart. Instead, they reassure you through consistency. They remind you through their actions that your feelings matter too. And little by little, your nervous system begins to relax. You stop expecting every conversation to become emotional warfare. There is something deeply powerful about being with someone who allows you to remain fully human, someone who does not require perfection in order to offer love, someone who understands that your voice deserves space in the relationship too. Because healthy love is not built upon fear and silence. It is built upon trust strong enough to hold honesty without falling apart. And perhaps that is one of the greatest signs that you are finally being loved correctly. You no longer feel afraid to tell the truth about what hurts, what heals, what matters, and who you truly are. Your voice no longer shakes when you speak your needs. Your heart no longer feels punished for being honest. And after years of feeling emotionally unsafe, you finally discover the freedom of being heard without fear. Not all healing arrives with dramatic breakthroughs or life-changing moments. Sometimes healing enters your life quietly, almost unnoticed, through ordinary moments that your wounded heart once believed it would never experience again. It appears in the calmness of a conversation where nobody raises their voice. It lives inside the comfort of being understood without having to explain your pain 1,000 times. It grows in the gentle spaces where your nervous system no longer feels forced to stay alert for disappointment, rejection, or emotional danger. And for people who have spent years surviving unstable love, safety itself becomes medicine. Many people do not realize how deeply unhealthy relationships affect the body and spirit. When love has constantly been tied to fear, inconsistency, or emotional neglect, the heart learns to remain prepared for pain even during peaceful moments. Some people become so accustomed to chaos that they begin to expect suffering everywhere they go. They anticipate abandonment before it happens. They become anxious when someone takes too long to reply. They panic when affection feels too steady because part of them believes calmness is only temporary. Trauma teaches the soul to brace itself for storms, even on sunny days. But healthy love begins to challenge those fears little by little, not through empty promises, but through repeated acts of consistency, through kindness that does not disappear overnight, through patience that remains even when you are difficult to understand, through loyalty that does not make you feel like you are constantly competing for reassurance. And although these things may seem small to others, they feel enormous to a heart that has spent years surviving emotional instability. At first, you may not even recognize that healing is happening. There is no grand announcement, no magical moment where all your wounds suddenly vanish. Instead, it happens quietly. One day you notice that you slept peacefully without replaying painful conversations in your mind. Another day, you realize you no longer feel afraid every time your phone becomes silent for an hour. You stop assuming distance whenever someone needs space. You stop preparing yourself emotionally for betrayal every time life becomes stressful. Slowly, your body begins to understand what your mind has struggled to believe. Not everyone who loves you intends to hurt you. There is something deeply sacred about emotional safety because it allows the hidden parts of a person to finally come out of survival mode. The version of you that once felt guarded begins to soften. You laugh more naturally, you trust more slowly, but more honestly. You stop feeling the need to constantly monitor another person's moods just to protect yourself from conflict. Your spirit no longer feels exhausted from carrying emotional tension every single day. And perhaps for the first time in a very long time, love begins to feel like a place where you can rest instead of a place where you must constantly defend yourself. A healthy relationship does not heal you by rescuing you from your past. It heals you by showing you a different experience of love altogether. One where respect is normal, one where care is consistent, one where your feelings are not treated like burdens. And over time, this changes the way you see yourself, because when someone handles your heart gently, you begin to realize that maybe your softness was never weakness. Maybe your need for reassurance was not too much. Maybe you were simply carrying wounds that never had the chance to heal properly. And that is the quiet miracle of healthy love. It does not force healing through pressure or perfection. It heals through safety, through presence, through patience, through the steady reminder that your heart no longer has to survive love in order to receive it. There was a time when chaos felt exciting to you, not because it brought you peace, but because it kept your emotions constantly awake. The unpredictability, the emotional highs and lows, the sudden affection followed by distance, all of it created a cycle so intense that you mistook it for passion. You thought love was supposed to leave you breathless with anxiety. You believed that if someone made your heart race, it must mean the connection was deep. But what many people do not understand is that the heart can race from fear just as easily as it can from love. And when a person spends years attached to inconsistency, calmness can begin to feel unfamiliar. Some people become addicted to emotional chaos without realizing it. They chase relationships filled with uncertainty because stability feels too quiet. They confuse mixed signals with mystery. They mistake emotional unavailability for depth. And because they have spent so long surviving unstable connections, healthy love can almost feel uncomfortable in the beginning. A partner who communicates clearly may seem too predictable. A relationship without constant conflict may feel boring. Not because peace lacks beauty, but because the nervous system has become conditioned to expect chaos in order to feel emotionally engaged. But eventually, life teaches a powerful lesson. Chaos may create intensity, but consistency creates security. And security is what allows love to grow without fear constantly poisoning it. In a healthy relationship, you no longer feel trapped on an emotional roller coaster where one good moment must always be followed by suffering. You are not left wondering whether affection will disappear tomorrow. You are not constantly trying to decode another person's behavior or searching for hidden meaning in every silence. Instead, there is steadiness, there is emotional presence, there is reliability, and over time, that consistency begins to feel more attractive than any temporary thrill chaos ever offered. A healthy partner does not make you question where you stand every single day. They do not use distance to control your emotions or inconsistency to keep you chasing validation. Their care remains visible even during difficult seasons. Their kindness does not vanish the moment life becomes stressful. And while this may seem ordinary to some people, to a heart that has spent years surviving emotional unpredictability, consistency feels revolutionary. It feels like finally being able to set down a weight you did not realize you were carrying. At first, stable love may feel strange. You may still wait for the sudden shift, the coldness, the disappointment that your past trained you to expect. You may become nervous when things feel peaceful for too long, because part of you assumes something bad must be coming next. But healthy love teaches your body and spirit a different rhythm. It teaches you that not every silence means abandonment. Not every disagreement means the relationship is ending. Not every difficult moment must become emotional destruction. Slowly, your heart begins to rest instead of constantly preparing for pain. And perhaps that is one of the greatest transformations of all. You stop craving relationships that exhaust you emotionally just because they create temporary excitement. You begin valuing honesty more than confusion, effort more than empty promises, stability more than intensity. Because maturity eventually reveals something that wounded hearts often struggle to believe. Love does not need to feel chaotic in order to feel real. Real love is not found in the constant fear of losing someone. It is found in the quiet confidence of knowing you are cared for consistently. It is found in the safety of being able to breathe, speak, and exist without emotional games draining your spirit. And when you finally experience that kind of love, you realize peace was never boring. Peace was the missing feeling your heart had been searching for all along. There is a moment in a healthy relationship when you begin to notice something quietly revolutionary during disagreement. It is not the absence of conflict, because two human beings will always see life differently at times. It is the absence of fear inside that conflict. In past experiences, an argument may have felt like a storm that threatened the entire connection. Words became weapons, silence became punishment, and the goal was no longer understanding, but winning. You may have learned to brace yourself for emotional damage every time differences arose, as if disagreement automatically meant danger. But in a healthy relationship, something entirely different unfolds. A disagreement does not turn into a battle for dominance. It becomes a space for understanding. You are no longer sitting across from someone trying to defend your worth or prove your innocence. Instead, you are two people trying to see what the other sees. Even when emotions rise, there is still a foundation beneath it that remains intact: respect. And that respect changes everything about how conflict feels in your body and in your spirit. You begin to realize that you can disagree without being dismissed. You can express frustration without being shamed. You can be honest about what hurt you without being told that your feelings are an inconvenience. In unhealthy dynamics, conflict often becomes a test of endurance, where the loudest voice or the most cutting words are mistaken for strength. But in healthy love, strength is not measured by how loudly someone speaks. It is measured by how gently they listen, even when they do not fully agree. At first, this kind of communication may feel unfamiliar. You may still carry the reflex to prepare for emotional harm whenever tension arises. You may still find yourself over-explaining or softening your truth just to avoid potential rejection. That is what repeated emotional invalidation does. It teaches you to shrink yourself during conflict. But a healthy partner does not require you to disappear in order for peace to exist. They allow space for your emotions without turning them into threats. And slowly, something within you begins to shift. You notice that arguments no longer leave deep emotional scars. They no longer create long-lasting distance or silent punishment. Instead, they become moments of clarity. You learn more about each other, not less. You realize that disagreement does not have to destroy connection. It can actually strengthen it when handled with maturity. Because when two people are not afraid of losing each other over every conflict, they are able to speak more honestly and love more securely. There is a different kind of peace that comes from being able to say, "This hurt me," and be met with, "I understand," instead of defensiveness or blame. There is relief in knowing that your emotions will not be used against you later. There is comfort in realizing that love does not collapse the moment it is tested. Instead, it bends, it listens, it adjusts, it grows. And perhaps one of the deepest lessons in a healthy relationship is this: you do not have to win against the person you love in order to feel safe. You do not have to fight to be heard. You do not have to prove your value in moments of disagreement. Because when love is rooted in respect, arguments stop being wars to survive and become conversations where both hearts are trying, even imperfectly, to understand each other better than before. There are people who enter relationships believing, often without realizing it, that love and control are connected. They were taught through experience, not theory, that caring sometimes comes with conditions and attention sometimes comes with ownership. In their past, affection may have been tangled with jealousy, monitoring, questioning, or emotional restriction. They may have been made to feel that being loved meant being available at all times, answering without delay, explaining every action, and adjusting their behavior to prevent someone else's discomfort. Slowly, without noticing, they begin to accept the idea that love must include limitation in order to feel real. But in a healthy relationship, that illusion begins to dissolve. You start to understand that control is not love, even when it is disguised as concern. Real love does not tighten around your life like a grip. It does not reduce your world to make someone else feel secure. Instead, it expands your sense of self. It allows you to remain connected to who you are outside the relationship. There is trust where there used to be suspicion, space where there used to be restriction, and respect where there used to be emotional pressure. At first, freedom in love can feel unfamiliar. You may even question it. You may wonder why someone is not constantly checking your every move, not because you want control, but because your past taught you that attention was often tied to surveillance. When you have experienced possessiveness disguised as affection, healthy trust can feel like distance before it feels like safety. But slowly, you begin to notice the difference between being controlled and being cared for. One drains your spirit, while the other allows it to breathe. In a healthy relationship, you are not required to shrink your life to make someone else feel comfortable. You are not asked to abandon friendships, interests, or personal space just to prove loyalty. Instead, you are trusted to exist fully as yourself. And that trust becomes one of the most healing experiences a person can have. Because being trusted communicates something powerful. You are not assumed to be unfaithful, careless, or irresponsible. You are seen as someone capable of love without chains attached to it. And when control is no longer present, something beautiful begins to grow in its place: mutual respect. You begin to respect not only the other person's feelings, but also their individuality. You understand that love does not mean merging identities until nothing personal remains. It means standing beside each other while still remaining whole. It means allowing space for growth instead of fear of loss. There is a quiet relief in not having to constantly defend your independence. You can make decisions without fear of interrogation. You can take time for yourself without guilt. You can breathe without feeling watched. And in return, you offer the same freedom. Not because distance is needed, but because trust makes space safe rather than threatening. Eventually, you realize that control was never love. It was insecurity trying to disguise itself as protection. Real love does not need to confine you to prove its existence. It does not demand proof every day. It does not tighten its grip when you step outside its reach. Instead, it believes in you. It respects you. It chooses you without trying to limit you. And that is when the meaning of love begins to change completely. It is no longer about possession. It is about partnership. Not about ownership, but about trust. Not about restriction, but about freedom shared between two people who choose each other without needing to be controlled in order to stay.